Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz drummer, vocalist, songwriter, and educator Barry Finnerty. He is a part of the Share Music Company's second Jazz Songbook Series, Collection 2. We talked about that and a life of music that he's been fortunate to share the stage with the likes of the Brecker Brothers and Miles Davis and many others. He's originally from San Francisco, began classical piano at 5, got his first guitar at 13. He actually lived in Hong Kong from 65 to 66, getting his first electric guitar, and he opened up for Herman's Hermits. He moved to New York in 1973 and then came back home to San Francisco in 1998. And along the way, he's got quite a catalog of stories. Enjoy.
Thanks again for taking a minute out for the show. I appreciate it.
Sure, my pleasure.
So you're a part of Chuck Scher's collection, the Songbook Series Collection number 2. Talk to me a little bit about how you got involved in this project and what it means for you.
Well, I've been with Chuck since I think around 2005. He's published two books of mine called the Serious Jazz Books. One's the Serious Jazz Practice Book, and which is all just a collection of scales and melodic patterns, and the other one is called the Serious Jazz Book 2, the Harmonic Approach, which is all about arpeggios and how to use those in improvisation. They're kind of like the Sherman tanks of the jazz education business, I tell students that, if you practice out of these books for 20 years or so, you could get pretty good. But, so that's how I got involved with Chuck. And then, I also had a kind of a rehearsal band with Chuck and some other guys in the Bay Area for several years. And we'd play some of my material, it was a way to I started writing a bunch of new tunes just because we were playing every week. So it was a good reason to, up my production. Cause usually I don't compose that much when I don't have an immediate need for it, to they have a recording session coming up or something like that. I guess Chuck and the other guys, they enjoyed my writing, so Chuck invited me to be on these books, with these other great players, and I have quite a few records out that I've recorded, so there's a lot of stuff to pick from.
Obviously this is coming out during the COVID time. There's been a lot going on. How have you been doing over this last 2 years with everything kind of getting turned upside down?
Well, I've been doing probably pretty bad, just like everybody else. I mean, live gigs were pretty much curtailed completely, at least for 2020. I mean, I had some gigs in the beginning of the year, but then after the beginning of March, everything got canceled. And I had a bunch of stuff over in Europe that was scheduled, because I have a place over in Italy that I bought a few years ago just to have a toehold in Europe, because there's a lot more interest in jazz and the kind of music that I play over there than there is here generally. And they know who I am over there. So I had a bunch of stuff canceled, and I wasn't able to go back for 2 years. But I went back in September of last year, and now I'm going back again in June, and I have a lot of stuff set up. I've got 2 different projects over there with a jazz quartet. I'm doing the Torino Jazz Festival with my own band and some other stuff. And then also I have a funk band called the Barry Finnerty's Super Bad Funk Machine, and these guys play great, kind of Tower of Power, James Brown, some of the more Crusaders stuff. We do some of the stuff from the Crusaders that I used to play with, and and that's a lot of fun too. And they've got quite a few festivals booked with that. I think 7 or 8 festivals plus some club stuff, so it's going to be a lot of fun. But during the COVID period, I just pretty much did remote recording sessions for people, and I had a few of those. Luckily, but not that many. People would send their tracks to me, and I'd, record. I have a studio set up in my house, so I would, lay down a bunch of tracks for different people. But, it was a tough go, but without the, pandemic unemployment assistance, I would have been in pretty bad shape. But that did help me get through it,
So let's go back to the beginnings of your life in San Francisco. How did music become your life? How did it all kind of steamroll, and who were some influences?
My mom taught me to read music when I was 5. She was a pretty good classical piano player when she used to play Beethoven and Mozart on the radio when she was in high school and stuff, and she kept it going. I don't remember her playing professionally too much when I was a kid, but she played in the house a lot, and so she started me out on classical piano, which I played until I was about, and I guess I went through high school taking piano lessons, but I didn't like to practice that much, And when I got my first guitar when I was 13 after seeing the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I think that's how a lot of people got into playing guitar. But then I started in rock and roll, but then I got interested in jazz when I was in high school also, and I started taking jazz guitar lessons, and sort of snowballed from there, I guess.
So who were some jazz influences that you were really digging on?
Probably my first influence was Howard Roberts. somebody gave me a Howard Roberts record when I was maybe 15, and he had sort of a melodic, funky approach to guitar, and I collected several of his records. And then through him, I got into like people like Kenny Burrell, Wes Montgomery, and George Benson, who actually became probably my favorite of all the jazz guitarists. But at the same time, I was getting influences from Jeff Beck and Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton. Those were sort of my big three of the rock blues guitar influences, and also B.B. King. So, my playing's sort of a combination of all that stuff,
The one thing, too, is that you were in Hong Kong for a while, you went to New York and came back to San Francisco. What did these trips to different cities do for you as a musician? How did you grow?
Well, Hong Kong, I was there when I was 13 to 14, and I played in my first rock and roll band, and we opened the show for Herman's Hermits. Afterwards, I signed autographs for a bunch of Chinese girls, and that hooked me on the music business right there. I was 14. But the other places, New York, I was there for 25 years. It wasn't just like a trip to a city. I lived there for, half my life practically, If I hadn't gone to New York when I did, when I was 21, I probably wouldn't have had the career that I had because, I was really hungry and I was, aggressive about getting gigs. I hooked up with a guy named Chico Hamilton, who was a pretty well-known jazz drummer, just a couple of weeks after I got there. And 3 months after I got there, I was playing at the Montreux Jazz Festival at the age of 21. So that was a pretty good start, Through that, I met some other people, and one thing led to another, and I got to play with, all these big names in jazz, which was great, And, but after a while, after 25 years, I sort of started getting bogged down in New York. I wasn't doing as much as I wanted to when I was playing with a Tuxedo Society band to make most of my money, being the rock and roll singer, doing Johnny B. Good and, Knock on Wood and stuff like that for rich people at society parties, which paid well, but it didn't make me happy. So I left and came back to San Francisco, which is my hometown, and my mom was getting old too, so it was a good thing that I came back. I don't feel like I've done as much recording and releasing my own personal music right now. I have a backlog of stuff for at least 3 or 4 albums of material that I do want to record sooner or later. But the songs contained in this book of the collection are mostly stuff that I had recorded previously. Some stuff from records from the 80s and 90s.
You mentioned Chico Hamilton. You mentioned a lot of other jazz greats that you had the chance to play around. What did they teach you that you in turn have used to teach younger players that you get around?
That's an interesting question. I think, the secret of getting better as a jazz player is to play a lot live and to also play with people that are better than you. That's what they taught me. I can't remember anybody ever sitting me down and actually teaching me a lesson of the people that I worked with, but you learn a lot from just being in their presence and seeing how they handle their business and the standard they set by how they play. Playing with the Brecker brothers, for example. Those guys were just on fire, and you have to raise yourself up to a certain level just to be considered to play with them. And then when you're playing with them, you have to bring 100% of what you got. The same with somebody like Hubert Laws. Hubert Laws is was one of my idols. I started playing with him when I was about maybe 24, I guess. He likes to play a variety of music. He'll do some classical influence stuff, some Brazilian, some jazz stuff, some blues. He does a little bit of everything. And so you have to be on your toes, and you have to be versatile and able to play a lot of different styles to play with somebody like that. So with the Crusaders, I had to get down and I really had to become a better rhythm guitar player. They would put me on the spot and make me prove that I could hold a groove by myself, which I really wasn't that good at doing before I got with them. I was more of a soloist, but I really wasn't that great at just laying down a rhythm part by myself that the whole band could set their watch to, So, you learn, you pick up different things with different people, but really it's more about playing with people that are better than you and trying to raise yourself up to the standard that they set.
Before everything shut down, I moved to the hometown of Pat Metheny in Lee Summit, Missouri out here. And I'm just curious, every time I mention that and bring Pat's name up, there's just so many wonderful stories. Do you have a good Pat story?
I have one story. I know Pat, but I don't know him that well. He's done incredibly well, obviously. But I remember when I was playing with Hubert Laws. This must have been around maybe 76 or possibly 77. I think it was 76, though. Pat was just starting to get known as a guitar player. And Hubert had a gig in Boston that for one reason or another I couldn't do. I had another commitment or something. So they got Pat Metheny to sub for me at that gig in Boston. And when the guys got back, I said, so how's this Pat Metheny guy? How's he play, man? Do I got anything to worry about? He said, oh, no, Barry, you got nothing to worry about, man. He only plays this one style. He can't play any funk or any blues or any R&B, any of this he just plays this one style. And man, you got nothing to worry about. But he stayed with that one thing that he does, and look what he's got. Look where he's taken it. You know, he never played any funk. He never decided to sing. He never played any hard blues or used any distortion or anything like that. He just did his thing, and And now he's probably the most successful jazz guitar player in the world, you know, even more than George Benson. You know, he draws big crowds and gets big money for his gigs. So he's been nice to me. One time I was playing at this little club on Bleecker Street. I had a gig where we would do like classic rock and roll. You know, we were playing like, you know, Jimi Hendrix stuff and Cream and all this stuff, and I liked playing that stuff. Because that's where I came from. And Pat came in and stayed for 2 sets, you know. And, you know, this was when he was already a huge jazz star. And everyone says, man, Barry, you sound really great. I'm like, yeah, thanks, Pat.
That's awesome. Yeah. Every story's good. Every story kind of opens up a better portal into who he is as a person, and it's always great.
He's always been pleasant to me, but I know he's a real hard-nosed businessman, too. You know, when Mark Egan and Danny Gottlieb were playing with him. They toured all over with the first Pat Metheny band. And then when time came to do some other stuff, they said, well, we want to be part of the band. We want to be partners in the band. And Pat said no. And so they left. But he only kept Lyle Mays and the other two. He said, okay, you guys can go your own way, you know?
So, you know, you've been around for a long time and you know, there's something to be said about longevity. So my question is, what do you like the best about being a musician? What's the best part of this process for you?
The best part of it is when you're playing and the band, and you know, and you're playing this live, and people are out there, and you're creating on the spot and responding to the inspiration of the moment, and it's right, and the groove is happening. Then age isn't even a factor. You feel like you don't feel like you're old. You know, you get off the stage and try to lift your amp, you might feel like you're old, but yeah, that's what it is. You know, it's just the pleasure of being in the moment and being able to create and share it with people. That's the best part of it, really. You know, it'd be nice if I had a more successful career, if I could get like $5,000 or $10,000 a night, but I've got to be happy with what I can get at this point, you know, and I've got some nice things set up in Europe. You know, that's the best part of it. It certainly isn't the money, you know.
So, you know, the one thing too about playing live quite a bit, you know, we've been away from it largely for the last couple of years. What do you hope we all realize about the power of live music as we get back to it more and more now?
One thing is that, you know, you can't replace that feeling of hearing live music, you know, and people know that. I mean, you know, there's been a proliferation since COVID of all these people sharing clips on Instagram and on Facebook, and 99% of them are them playing by themselves, you know, including me. I mean, I've shared some things. I might make a little backing track, or sometimes I play solo, and there's these young guys that are playing fantastic guitar. You know, they have phenomenal technique and they're super clean, but they're playing by themselves. And you wonder what happens when these guys get with a band. What happens when they have to actually come up with stuff on the fly, you know, and not play a conceived, you know, practiced piece of music, you know. I don't know. I mean, but it's been coming back quite a bit. I had a fair amount of gigs in 2021. You know, we'd play outside or whatever, you know, in various people's courtyards. There was a fair amount of things, but it's starting to pick up again this year. I think pretty much a lot of countries are just saying, you know, they're downgrading COVID to be like the flu, basically. So they're not worried about it that much. I mean, so they still make you show a green pass, which is a confirmation of that you've been vaccinated in Italy to attend a public event or to go to a restaurant and stuff like that. But I think we're largely coming out of it. I mean, I sure the hell hope so.
You've played on a lot of stages. I'm sure you've seen a lot of gigs in your time. Let's say you have a time machine that pulls up in front of your house when we get off the phone, and you can go anywhere in the history of jazz. Who are you going to say? Where are you going to go?
I might go back to like the 70s, to tell you the truth. Or, I mean, if I could go back to the 60s and be old enough to play with some of those guys, I would do that. But of course, I was just a kid in the 60s, you know. But I mean, it was a great time. And when I went to New York in the 70s, it was very affordable. I mean, my first apartment was like $150 a month or something, and there was all the great players were still around: Elvin Jones, Miles, Jimmy Garrison, McCoy Tyner, Bill Evans. I saw so many of the most wonderful jazz musicians at that time in New York City. But it did, and the 80s weren't bad either. That was when I did, a lot of my biggest time stuff. I was with the Crusaders. They had #1 hit record with Street Life, and we were touring all over the world, flying in first class, and playing sold out venues everywhere. It was pretty, it wasn't bad. You don't realize, it doesn't ever get much better than that, really. I was only 25 or 26 when I was doing it, 27 maybe. And you know how you make a jazz musician complain, don't you?
How's that?
Give them a gig.
Awesome.
In other words, it doesn't matter how great the situation is. These guys will always find something to bitch about. Pardon my French.
Yeah. No, I get it. Everyone has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are: your family, your friends, your fans. But you ultimately live your life. Who do you think you are?
Good question. I think I'm I don't know. I'm just me, man. My friends know who I am. I try to, but then my people who are closest to me know how neurotic I can be about certain things, and how I'm a big worrier and things. I don't know. Everyone's got their faults, but who do I think I am? I'm just me. I try to do the best I can. I try to play the best I can. I try to sing the best I can. I'm also a vocalist. I do a lot of singing in various projects. I did one thing over in Germany that was a great band with all vocals with 3 horns. We did a bunch of Mose Allison tunes and some Crusader stuff, and still enjoy doing that too. In fact, we're working right now on a single from my funk band in Italy. We're doing a cover of the Crusaders. They had an instrumental hit called "Put It Where You Want It." And we wrote words to it, and I'm just working on it right now. I'm sending it over to them, and we're going to try to make a summer single out of it. It should be a lot of fun. We wrote great words. Me and my wife are kind of a songwriting team. We've written some pretty cool stuff. But I don't know. How would you describe yourself? Who are you really? It's a hard question to answer.
It is, yeah. And I think sometimes brevity works with that. I think there's a myriad of ways that you can go with it, but I think you answered. I think that's your answer is an answer. So, hey, man, thank you for taking a minute out for the show today, Barry. Good luck with everything with the book. I want
to say it's a real honor to be included with all those great composers in the Chuck Scher Composer Series, songbook series, because there's, I'm in there with Benny Golson and Randy Brecker and some really world-renowned people. So I'm really honored and humbled to be included with them, because my material really hasn't been heard as much as theirs has, but it's great to get it in there, and maybe some people will check it out.
Absolutely, yep, and we're going to get it out to the people. So yeah, Barry, thanks, man. Good luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York City, Kansas City, San Francisco, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Barry for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. And for everything Joe Domino related, go to joedomino.com, and when you're there, if you feel like it, you can kick in a few bucks to the Neon Jazz cause. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.